Shepherds, why this jubilee? In the name of the Word made flesh. Amen. Why? Why this jubilee? Why are the shepherds so happy on Christmas Eve? By now, you imagine, you've heard this story so many times. In church, at home, on television, recounted unforgettably by Linus Van Pelt in 1965's A Charlie Brown Christmas. That perhaps some of its rough and surprising edges have been worn away by sentimental packaging and repeat listening. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. All the world. Tracked. Tracked. We're not talking about a census so that inquiring minds in Rome could understand the evolving shape of the nuclear family in Israel and Judah. We are talking about an early mode of the surveillance economy. The registration was a run-up to taxation, and the taxation was punishing. Taxes were not collected to fund public education or public health or to clothe and feed the poor under Roman rule. Taxes instead drained wealth out of these poor and far-flung provinces to enrich the ruling class in Rome. All went to their towns to be registered, Luke tells us. Imagine Polish Jews in the first day of Nazi occupation. Name, address, and you will begin to have a sense of the time and place in which the birth of Christ takes place. Emperor Augustus was worshipped as a god, as were members of his family. So Roman rule also acknowledged the supremacy of some humans and the subhumanity of others. Humans and better humans. An understanding that persists stubbornly through human history. No room at the inn for some. The perhaps scavenged and improvised clothing for this newborn king. His birth among the animals. These are people who have been consigned to the outskirts. And to these shepherds, the migrant farm workers of their time, the mysterious messenger appears to tell them that their consignment is sinful and fraudulent to the mind and to the heart of their Creator. That the ruling order is unnatural and against the grain of the love at the heart of the universe. Great joy for all the people, the messenger proclaims. And in her words, the shepherds glimpse an alternative to the only reality they have ever known. A magnificent, glimpsed alternative. That's enough. They run to Bethlehem to see the child and its parents. Shepherds, why this jubilee? Their joy has a defiant element to it. Defiant joy. It's fueled by the realization that what they have historically seen and felt and cowered from is not the end of them, is not the ultimate meaning of their lives. You may kill us, insisted the early Christian martyrs to Roman authority. but you are powerless to control our hearts and minds or the meaning of our lives and our deaths. This is the same defiant joy that sustained Martin Luther King in the Birmingham jail, Dietrich Bonhoeffer in the Nazi prison in which he would eventually die, Alexei Navalny in the Arctic prison camp in which he, this past February, breathed his last. God will approach, wrote Bonhoeffer to his parents from prison, Christmas 1943. God will approach. God will approach where men turn away. Do you remember those last public images of Navalny from his trial? The very last time the world saw him, gaunt, emaciated, he would make this gesture with his hands over his heart, ostensibly a signal of love to his wife and teenaged children in exile from Russia. But I think, too, a gesture of defiant joy. The love of the gospel, the love of this holy night, is not a clinging and demanding emotion, but a genuine giving of the self for the sake of something beyond the self. Shepherds, why this jubilee? It's easy to forget, isn't it, the degradation to which they had been systemically subjected. It's easy to forget in our own post-Christian era that our own nation would not have been transformed by the abolition movement and a century later by the civil rights movement without the defiant joy of the gospel. Good news of great joy for all the people that God made us, every human person, for loving, generous solidarity, for mutually reinforced dignity, and that anything else is a shabby and manipulative lie. Shepherds, why this jubilee? Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, they say. And they run, we are told. Earlier this afternoon, in our children's pageant, the narrator shared the understanding that Bethlehem means house of bread. House of bread. Did you hear that? Bethlehem means house of bread. On that first night of his life, Jesus is, in a manner of speaking, born in the house of bread. On the last night of his life, he will take bread and bless it and break it and share it. He asks us in so doing to remember him in a certain way. He doesn't ask us to think of the bread and the wine as magical. He wants us to break and share and eat together as remembrance of him and as a sign of God's love for all people, of the way the world should work. I'm going to ask you to listen to something carefully in a few minutes when we bless and give thanks for the bread together. We will ask God to put God's Spirit on this simple bread and wine. But at the same time, we will ask God what we always ask of God in that moment, to send God's Spirit upon us, our bodies, bread, wine, and every single one of us in mystic, sweet communion. No charge, no transaction, no admission fee. Shared equally to anyone who asks, regardless of how horrible you may have been to someone else earlier this afternoon. There it is. This bread, this wine, this love. Love. Not a clinging, demanding emotion. This love is a true giving of the self for the sake of something beyond the self. And on that night so long ago, those selves were shepherds. And tonight, those selves are you and me and everyone here and everyone across the world who comes to a table and says, Amen. Merry Christmas. It's good to be together.